First, Biden dropped out. Now, for those that are asking, longtime viewers, listeners of Carving Up Live, Bryce, why the heck are you talking about Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., the 46th president of the United States, dropping out of the race? Well, I would say, A, it's one of the biggest news in political history. B, I have studied presidential history and American history longer than I've studied sports, so much so that I did a 10-part series 2 years ago with my buddy Isaac Lawson, shout out to Isaac, on U.S. presidents, from Washington up until what was at that point a young Biden administration. And thirdly, I talk about what other people are talking about. I talk about what's interesting. That's what generates, I think, a good conversation on the show, and that's what I strive to do. Joe Biden dropped out yesterday out of the presidential race. He did so on Twitter. I actually found out, ironically, through Shams Charania, which I find absolutely hilarious, that the top, and listen, Shams and Woj have been battling out for a while. Shams has officially won the battle, okay? Shams, broke the news, or was one of the first to break the news that President Biden's dropping out of the race, but he put out a statement talking about how it's been an honor serving the country the last 4 years, but he's going to step aside for a new generation of Democrat leaders, and he went on to shortly after endorse Vice President Kamala Harris to be the next president of the United States. So more on Kamala Harris in about 5 minutes or so. As far as Biden, and I think this is where I differ from some of my friends on the left who have been, not all, but some of them who have been skeptical about Joe Biden, potentially his opportunity, his chances to win this upcoming election. Here's my thing. It is a very, very risky call to drop out of the race with 3.5 months to go before the people make their decision this November. Very risky. Because the fact of the matter is, if this was going to happen, if you're the Biden administration, if you're the Democrat Party as a whole, you would have much rather this happen about 9 months ago. You would have. Just to give you time to prepare, time to put together a convention around a specific candidate, potential presumed nominee, as the Republicans did. We've known Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee for well over a year. The fact that you had your Nikki Haley's, your Ron DeSantis's of the world, your Tim Scott's, your Chris Christie's, all running for president. It was, with all due respect to those individuals, a wasted effort. You guys were not going to take the nomination from Trump. It was not going to happen. He essentially runs the party now. It's risky in the sense that I'm not confident, and I'll get to Kamala Harris in just a second. I'm not 100% confident. Matter of fact, I'm more pessimistic than anything, that another leader within the Democratic Party has a better chance of winning this election than Joe Biden. Bryson, he's old, so's Trump. Did you watch that speech at the Republican National Convention? And I have to say this, by the way, this has to be the single most insane I'm only 21 years old, but man, it's going to go down the history books as some of the craziest 3.5 weeks in American history, because you have the disastrous debate for Joe Biden on June 27th. Almost immediately after, certainly the day after, you start hearing calls from leaders within the Democratic Party begging him to step down. You got the op-ed by George Clooney. You got it was reported Barack Obama, former President Obama, was working behind the scenes to oust his former VP in change for a younger leader in the Democratic Party. By the way, in between that, there was assassination attempt against Donald Trump, where, thank God, he and two other people who had survived tragically. A man lost his life. Prayers to him and his family. Then you have the RNC. He chooses J.D. Vance, who's nowhere near a moderate Republican. You would think Trump would try and win the middle-of-the-road voters, the independents like myself. Not that I'd ever vote for Trump, by the way, but you would assume that you would try and win some of those middle-of-the-road candidates. Vance is chosen. Trump gives a speech. He steps into a situation where, if Trump stays on script, sticks to the quote-unquote unifying message that not just Republican leaders are talking about, the whole media. Man, I was hearing CNN, ABC News, CBS. It's a unifying message. Here we go. Nope, same guy. Hasn't changed one darn bit. And he blew it. For that reason, I think that may have cleared the way potentially for a Joe Biden victory, at least more so than it would have for a Gavin Newsom, who's not even popular in his own state, much less the country. And let's be honest, kind of fits the mold of a Democratic liberal elite. He does. Gretchen Whitmer, I really like. I think she would be a solid candidate in the future to run for president, but I don't think, given the fact that Joe Biden has been in that executive branch, by and large, whether you agree with his policies or not, by and large, has done more good things than bad. Joe Biden is going to, in history, particularly given the fact that his term is going to end after 4 years, his presidency is going to end after 4 years. He's going to go in the upper half of presidents in history. That is, I looked at my list the other day when Biden, or actually yesterday when Biden dropped out. I'm like, where would Biden finish amongst presidents in history? There's been 44 men who occupy that office, not including Biden. At 22, I had William Howard Taft. He was a better president than William Howard Taft. He was. And Taft actually wasn't as bad of a president as he gets credit for. That's another discussion for another day. So that's the Joe Biden side of it. For Kamala Harris, who I had concerns, or at least you would have concerns if you're somebody who leans left. Again, I've always said I'm an independent, lean left socially, lean right fiscally. You would have concerns if Joe Biden steps down. Who the heck is it? Because now you have the potential, I heard it floated by Nancy Pelosi and others, hey, we could have an open convention in Chicago in a few weeks at the DNC. That would be an absolute... The Democrats have already hurt themselves in the last few weeks already as it pertains to the infighting, as it pertains to... For as flawed as the Republican Party is, gosh darn it, are they not unified behind Trump? I mean, it was you. Nikki Haley hates Trump. It is documented. She does not like the guy. Man, she was all in for him. All in for him. While simultaneously shaking her head, but nonetheless in for her former boss, because she obviously worked in the Trump administration the first go-around from 2017 to 2021. The Democratic Party, quite a different story. Some have wanted Biden to stay. Some wanted him to go. It was this infighting ever since that debate debacle on June 27th. They did themselves enough damage as is. Having an open convention would only further that divide and lessen the trust in the American people, what trust there was or is by independent voters in the Democratic Party. The reason I keep saying independents, by the way, Republicans are going to get the Republican vote and Democrats can get the Democratic vote. That's just the way it goes. Independents make up nearly half the country statistically. I say this as an independent, we decide elections. That's how it goes. And so Kamala Harris, to me, including Biden, has, by a long shot, the best chance to win the presidency within the Democratic Party. And I don't think it's remotely debatable. Because if the question is about Joe Biden, come on. He's going to be 82 years old at the end of his term, easily the oldest president in American history. For the record, I'd prefer people above the age of, I don't want to sound ageist. I heard Bill Maher once said it's the last acceptable prejudice in America, and I agree. I hate ageism. I don't want to sound that way, but I think we do need to at some point put an age cap on being president of the United States. We put that, Washington set the precedent of being, you run for 2 terms and then that's it. There's a couple individuals, Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt come to mind, that tried to run for a 3rd term. Although Theodore Roosevelt, that technically would have been a 2nd term, another story for another day, until FDR literally broke the precedent, won his 3rd term in 1940, won a 4th term in 1944, passed away a month into his administration, and then they passed a law saying that, hey, you can only run for 2 terms as president. So we've done this before. I would be very surprised if after this election cycle, we don't put like a 75 to 80-year-old something like age cap on being president. You can be too young to be president, under 35, you can be too old to be president. If the main question, the biggest question about Biden is age, done. That's over now. You don't have to worry. Kamala Harris is 59 years old. That is now off the table. And so you have that component. You have the fact that by and large, Joe Biden's policies have been as bipartisan, working with the other side. That's, I think, what was one of the major draws of him back in 2020 is his relationships, given that he's been in politics for 5 decades, with leaders on the other side, your Mitch McConnells, your Lindsey Grahams, being able to work with Republicans to get legislation passed. It's an advantage he had that, quite frankly, Barack Obama didn't have, Bill Clinton didn't have. I'm not entirely sure George W. Bush had, and we know Donald Trump dang sure didn't. Well, in that administration with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, be it policies to combat gun violence, which you guys know that's one of my biggest issues by a mile. getting other people on the other side to work on those issues, to agree on those issues, to compromise on those issues. Kamala Harris is in the same administration. And what I think is paramount for Kamala Harris is for her to not make the same mistake that Donald Trump made. Trump had an opportunity. Glenn Youngkin, governor of Virginia. I know Nikki Haley was floated. I doubted he was going to pick Haley after the back and forth when she was running for president herself. But a more moderate, middle-of-the-road appeal to the majority of the country that calls themselves independent, or I shouldn't say, the more independents call them, the majority of voters in this country, you have more independents than you have Democrats or you have Republicans, is what I'm trying to say. Instead, Trump chose J.D. Vance, who is objectively on the about as far right in the spectrum as you could possibly imagine. Kamala Harris herself would be arguably the most liberal president we've ever had in history. I would say FDR probably exceeds her, but you can make that case. She now has to choose a middle-of-the-road vice presidential candidate. I think Josh Shapiro would be a phenomenal choice for her. I think you're talking about a governor, so he has experience from, in terms of running a state, running a key battleground state, Pennsylvania, which we know Democrats have to win. You lose Pennsylvania, you're done. I think Trump actually won Pennsylvania over Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and we know how that election went. So, that's choosing a governor who's a middle-of-the-road candidate from a key battleground state the Democrats are not guaranteed to win. So picking Gavin Newsom makes no sense. It's two people from the West Coast. It puts up a bad image to voters like, well, there's your, West Coast elite. It would put off that sort of vibe. You could pick, Mark Kelly from Arizona wouldn't be a bad choice. I think Josh Shapiro, I'm going to put this out there, I think would be the best choice for Kamala Harris to be president. But the fact of the matter is this. Biden stepping down is risky this late in the game. You would have much rather he did it 9 months ago if he were going to do it at all. That said, if Kamala Harris is the nominee, Dems got a pretty good shot, in my view. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.